Cynthia, were you raised a witness, or were you converted into the witnesses?
Well, I was raised part of my life as a witness because my mother converted to the witnesses. We had all been Roman Catholic, and I'd been baptized in the Catholic Church, went through the First Communion, all that stuff. And when my mother when I was about 13, I remember my last birthday party, and that was the last birthday party I had growing up, because my mother had started studying to be a witness, and we all started going to the Kingdom Hall at that time. So I spent my latter childhood in the witnesses.
So were you receptive to being raised a witness at this time, or was there some difficulties?
At first, it was scary because even the name Jehovah's Witnesses, it gave me a strange feeling. Even at that age, I'm like, oh, Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a scary feeling, and I didn't want to get into it. But my mother had me start studying, and she had all the I did the truth book, and it was kind of forced on us, and I didn't want it at first, but I don't know how it happened. The mind control set in after a while. I think it was after I attended my first circuit assembly, and then for some reason at that circuit assembly I became convinced it was the truth. And I don't know why, and I don't know what it was that set me off, but I don't know if it was this whole, everybody's doing it and everybody's believing this, and that, I kind of fell into step with it and under that mind control. But I think that was maybe when I was around 14 that happened to me. And then I remember kind of, being really zealous for the Watchtower at that time.
So you're a witness, you're baptized, and what is it that causes you to start to question the organization and what it's teaching, or was it any particular thing morally that you saw? What was it that first shook you about maybe this isn't God's organization?
Well, there were a couple little things, that I kind of threw on the back burner for a while. I think that I never really believed in their blood doctrine. In fact, I never carried the no blood transfusion card. I refused to because it never really made sense. Although I didn't understand the scientific implications, I didn't know, of course, what I know today, but it just was one of those things that when you know something is wrong, and you know inside that it's wrong, you just don't know how to explain that it's wrong. And I never talked about it, and I never decided that, I never said anything to anybody about it. But it was one of the things that I just never agreed with. So I never carried the card with me. Another thing was, after becoming a witness, I remember being in high school, and I remember a police officer coming to our girls' PE class and talking to us about self-defense and what we should do if we ever got in a situation where if we were raped and the police officer said, well, if it's the rape or your life, then it's better to just submit to it than lose your life over it. If you've got a knife to your throat, it's better to live. And I was like, well, of course that makes sense. And so I told somebody at the Kingdom Hall about that, and they shook their head and they said, oh, no, because you'd be committing fornication if you submitted to the rape. And I thought to myself, huh? How can that be?
Right. Yeah.
The rape is a forcibly violent thing, and so the elders and the brothers says, oh no, you're just supposed to lose your life. And then I'm thinking, that's almost as crazy as the blood thing, although I never verbalized it. Another thing that happened was when I was 18 years old. Like most of the other girls, I got married. I was too young. Married the first guy who came along.
Right.
and it was a horrible marriage, and this young Jehovah's Witness man decided that he had a very bad temper, and he decided it was okay to hit me and to beat me and to abuse me. And this happened on a very regular basis. It wasn't like a once in a while thing, or he did it once or twice. It was very very regular. He was horrible. And when I brought it to the elders' attention, one of the elders told me that perhaps I wouldn't get beaten if I didn't nag so much.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, if I didn't nag so much, then, I would not be beaten. And he showed me a scripture in Proverbs that says, better that a man lives up on the rooftop than be in the same house with a contentious wife. So he was blaming me for the beatings.
Your husband beating on you.
Yeah, I was bringing it on myself. And if I was just a better wife, and if I was just, behaved, and, all I needed to do was, read the literature more, and, just, stay obedient to Jehovah, be obedient to my husband, everything would work out. Well, it wasn't working out, and it didn't work out. So 2 years into it, I found myself pregnant, but toward the end of my pregnancy, I had realized that my husband had also started smoking, and so I had to let the elders know about it. And what happened was there was a committee meeting, and he was promptly kicked out and disfellowshipped for smoking.
Wow.
But he was never disciplined or talked to about abusing me.
Right.
So at that point, I began to think, so what's worse, smoking or beating your wife?
So now you're taking psychology classes and
classes and all kinds of classes.
Right. And so that it gets your critical thinking going then.
Right. It gets my critical thinking. So I'm looking at the Watchtower and Awake magazines now, and realizing, there's really nothing in these. It's very repetitious.
Right.
I didn't see any. It didn't look. When you're reading textbooks and you see scholarly information and you see footnotes and how they've, people have really substantiate what they say, and then you see the Watchtower and it doesn't substantiate anything, and Scripture is quoted out of context. And as I, looked at different things, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean that at all,
Right.
And so I quit reading the Watchtowers. I just couldn't. I got to the point where I couldn't stand them anymore.
They don't like to reference their source material too much, do they?
No.
Right. So you say you started going to school, and I guess you went to college.
Yeah, I started going to community college, and because I didn't have any skills, I had kind of gone through the 70s, the pre-1975 thing, not really doing very well in school. I'd gotten a GED, but I thought Armageddon was coming. I thought Armageddon would be there by 1974, 75, and so I didn't think that there was much. I didn't place a lot of value in studying and doing well in school, so I didn't have really any skills to speak of. So I decided to go back to school, and I started to study accounting and business, and as I was in school and had to take different courses, your English, your math, your all your general ed type of courses, and it was at that point when I started to learn critical thinking. And so being the kind of questioning person I was before, because as I was telling you, some things about the Watchtower doctrine just didn't make sense, about the rapes and the thing about the blood, and, those things never made sense in my head. And as I started to, go through critical thinking processes in my own mind, and I'm still a witness and I'm still going to the meetings, But now I'm looking at the Watchtower and the Awake magazines, and I'm seeing, some of this stuff, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm trying to look at it and trying to, make sense out of what, the stuff they're saying. And I started to see as like, this is just a lot of repetition of the same stuff over and over again. So I quit reading the magazines.
Wow.
I quit reading the magazines, and around 1980, I just decided I had enough. I was pretty much by that time quit going to the meetings because it was a burden to go to the meetings. I was going to school full time, working part time, raising my son. Thursday night and Tuesday nights were just way too much, especially when you've got an active little boy.
Right.
And no babysitting at the Kingdom Hall. No nurseries.
Yeah.
By February 1980, I disassociated myself from the Watchtower because, well, number one, I didn't want to be, having to endure the elders calling me because I kept getting all kinds of calls. They wanted to talk to me, and or they would call saying, "Well, you haven't turned in any time lately," and I'm like, "I haven't turned any time for a year." And my mother cried when I disassociated myself. She was very upset. All my witness relatives, because when we got into the Watchtower, we brought in relatives too. My mother's older sister, my cousins, her kids became witnesses. I had some other cousins and so forth who also became witnesses. So we had this neat little family group who was all in the Watchtower, and here I go and I disassociate myself, and I'm like, I bring shame to the family name.
Well, you talk about a God incident. We don't have what was it? Let me look up the word exactly. It's God incidents. Yeah. Now, what was it that what brought you to this God incident?
Well, like I said in my written testimony, I said there are, when God is in control, it's not a coincidence. It's a God incidence. And I had a friend who had invited me to church, and he was trying to get me to go to church. And for a couple of years, I just, was burned out. I didn't know what to do. I still believed in God. Finally, I went to church with him. And as I was in the church afterwards, I looked around after the service, and I saw a lady that looked really, really familiar. And I thought, oh, my gosh, this lady looks like somebody that I used to run into, at different witness events, conventions, assemblies. You know how you see people at weddings and different things, where witnesses have get-togethers. And I knew that lady. She looks so familiar. So I decided, well, I'm going to go use a code word and see if she is the one that I'm thinking about. And so I went up to her and I said, "Hi, you look really familiar. Did I ever see you at any of the assemblies?"
Right.
So, I used the Watchtower speak to see if it made any sense to her, and I knew, well, if I used that word and, she wasn't who I thought she was, then she'd probably kind of look at me funny and say, well, I think you must be mistaken. And then when I said assemblies, then she went wide-eyed, her mouth dropped open, and she says, "Are you an ex-witness too?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she gave me a big hug, and kind of took me under her wing. And I told her I had left, but I just didn't know exactly what was wrong with the Watchtower. And we spent many hours on the phone and in person together. And, she kind of helped me through and showing me scripture where the Watchtower was wrong. And the one thing that stood out at that time, she said, "Cynthia, if you ever went back to the witnesses, that Jesus would never be your mediator." And I said, "Well, what do you mean Jesus would never be my mediator?" So she showed me a Watchtower from 1979 that said that Jesus was only mediator for the 144,000.
Right.
And, of course, the critical thinking, kicked in. I'm like, Jesus is not mediator only for 144,000, because I've read it says Jesus is mediator for all who accept him.
Right.
not just 144,000. And that was it for me. That was a deal breaker. That was a thing that just showed me there would be no way, no how ever I could ever become back into the witnesses again.